Hello and welcome to Ethics in the News. My name's Hannah Storm and I'm the director of the Ethical Journalism Network. In this edition, I'm speaking with the Chief Executive Officer of the Public Media Alliance, Sally-Anne Wilson. And I began by asking her what she made of Facebook's announcement that it would label information coming from state-controlled media.
I think Facebook's decision to label state-controlled media in many ways we could welcome, because I think we are all aware that there are states out there that really try and influence what's going on politically outside of their own countries, and that actually labelling state-controlled does have a benefit. We want Facebook to be more transparent and the users of Facebook to be more transparent. Where PMA has concerns is that obviously, apart from a few that we very clearly understand are literally state-controlled, when we get to national broadcasters, many self-describe as public media, and some are genuinely media that's there to serve the public. Their governments understand that they're there to promote public interest and not government interest. And so I think that's where it gets more confusing, and we've been concerned about whether Facebook has in-house all the prerequisite skills to really unpick whether a broadcaster today, tomorrow, the next day is genuinely a public broadcaster. So that's why we're interested. But we welcome the fact that this has brought on a debate about what public broadcasting is, what public media is.
If anybody knows what public media is, it must be you. What is public media?
There are plenty of academic criteria of what public media is. We're aware that there's been a change from public broadcasting into multi-platform public media. I'm not sure that regulation has kept up with that, actually. But what we know is there are certain core values, and they very much align with your own at the Ethical Journalism Network, that it's about accuracy, impartiality, independence above and beyond all else. Public media is usually a national media system that isn't influenced by either commercial interests or political interests.
So effectively it's media that is able to be held accountable by its audiences and hold those in power to account, which presumably has been very helpful in the recent pandemic.
Absolutely. It's that holding power to account that rests on public media has to be able to call out those in power and keep them in check. And I think governments, politicians have to understand that. I think during the recent pandemic, we've seen very clearly globally a big return to public media, because whilst you can get information about your celebs through Facebook and through all sorts of social media streams, when you know that information is actually going to make a difference to your life choices and your health and your security, then it's really important that there's lots of fact checking. That's critical for public media, and that you can trust. So it's that link between the public and trust and media that really public media for me sits at the heart of, and that's why as a media system it's unique.
Is there a sense that public media really comes into its own at times of crisis? Have we seen this kind of model in the past, even before COVID-19?
For a long time, the Public Media Alliance has looked at the role that public broadcasting plays in crisis, emergency and disaster. Way back in 2012, we looked around the world and we could see that the terrible fires in Australia, in Victoria in 2009, the role there that ABC, particularly ABC Radio, had played. Again in 2011 in the tsunami. And every time you look on whether it's a natural disaster or man-made acts of terrorism, when people know their lives depend on getting credible information, that's when public media comes into its own. And unfortunately, I think in the age of social media, what's happened is that, and all the digital global giants, we know that media for much of the public has come to mean entertainment. And particularly where we live in the UK, but in many parts of the world, it's been easy just to think about media as entertainment, when actually this crisis, this pandemic, has really brought it home to people that getting information you can trust. We all saw lots of misinformation. We continue to see misinformation about COVID-19 on social media and on the internet. And so we need to make sure that the word public broadcasting, public media, is synonymous with accuracy.
In the last few years, we've seen a bit of a crisis of trust between the media and the public, haven't we? Even in countries that were historically bastions of free press. How important is it that the public media are still able to hold those in power to account? How are we seeing public media floundering, and what do they need to be doing, particularly in those countries that are historically most related to press freedom?
Everywhere, if a country defines its national media organisation as public media, then it has to step up to the standards that are broadly those of the Ethical Journalism Network. You know, the accuracy, the diversity, impartiality, independence. But I think this role of keeping power to account, a lot of politicians think the media is powerful, but that power is only as good as the trust of the public in it. And I think where we are now, we've seen this massive return to trust in public broadcasting worldwide, where there is genuine public broadcasting that sticks by its principles. I think what worries me is that even here in the UK we've seen, and particularly before the last election, where the leaders of both main parties were putting out their own broadcasts on Facebook and other social media streams rather than being called to account by professional journalists. And that's where we need to ensure this is understood, because I'm sure in the long run it will damage any politician's credibility if they can't actually be questioned about their actions.
We're obviously in the UK, but in some countries quite close to us, even within Europe, we're seeing COVID-19 being used as a cloak to clamp down on press freedoms. How concerned are you about that?
Week by week, even during the pandemic, we've seen this gradual erosion of media freedom, including public media. And governments worldwide, even in Europe, are using COVID-19 as a way of bringing in stricter controls on information, but actually restricting genuine press freedom. And that is terrifying. At the moment, we have real concerns about what's going on in RTHK, the public broadcaster in Hong Kong, that has a charter for what public media is, what a public broadcaster's role is. Also in Poland, in Czech Republic, in Slovenia, you know, day by day, we're seeing changes to the board that are not always in line with what we'd see as an independent public broadcaster, and then those changes mean that there are new board members that may press editorial lines that really aren't impartial any longer or independent. And we have to keep on that. I mean, you know, again, coming back to home, you know, Channel 4 News does a fantastic job, and it's seen as a really strong news by so many people here in the UK on fairly limited resources. Every time I dip in and see that yet again politicians are refusing to come on, you know, senior government officials are refusing to come on to Channel 4 News to face questioning. And that just isn't good enough in a democracy.
So you're an alliance, we're a network. It strikes me that a lot of time we hear this phrase solidarity. You know, I've spoken to my colleagues in Hungary who say we need more solidarity. How do we as alliances and networks respond to this clampdown? Is there anything we can do to support our colleagues in countries where press freedom is severely under attack?
I think we have to work more closely together. I've seen a big pulling together of a lot of media freedom organisations, and we're included in that, you're included in that. We've been working along with the Media Freedom Coalition that was set up by the UK government last year, and we're working hard to call them to account, the members of the coalition, the advisory network which I sit on, to ensure that worldwide we're seeing everybody pulling together for better media freedom. And I think it's just so critical that we call out where there are weaknesses. And we know there's been weaknesses recently in the United States. I mean, just look at the number of journalists injured in the last few weeks, and that's not good enough. And injured very often by state authorities. I mean, with clear press written across them. These weren't accidental attacks on journalists, and we know that the world will be a far poorer place if we don't stick to improving journalism and making sure that people understand the role of professional journalism, or, you know, identified citizen journalists. Everybody needs to be protected if they are there to expose what's going on in terms of power and hold power accountable.
And that was Sally-Anne Wilson speaking with me there. Sally-Anne is the Chief Executive Officer of the Public Media Alliance.